So, I'm a game designer. That's what I do for fun. And in this talk, I'm going to explain my view of what it is that how people can learn, or how they learn through playing games. What we just got from Derek was how certain off-the-shelf games can be used for teaching things. So the next step is, if you've someone who's got something you want to teach people, is, well, let's make some games. Rather than trying to find a game that already teaches it, let's make some game that teaches it. And this is what's now called serious games. There's an oxymoron for you. Or alternatively, it's an absolute indication, because all games are serious to the players. So I'm going to talk about how, if you were going to go about making a game that delivered some kind of educational payload, you would do it from the design point of view, because there are some things that people do which are stupid. The people aren't stupid, just the things they do are stupid. Learning is not the same as teaching. I'm going to say how people learn from games. Teachers decide how to teach through that. Whether you like it or not, people will learn things from playing games. So if somebody's playing a game, they will learn something, irrespective of whether you like it or not. If you're somebody who plays games yourself, you'll know that they learn all sorts of wonderful things. If you're not somebody who plays games yourself, you think that they're learning how to go out and shoot up a school, or how to go out and molest children, or any of the other things, how to go out and, well, actually you probably can't do much sex on a game, but still. So if most the people who don't know about games have got kind of scary view of what games can teach. Fortunately, they're all dying, and as time progresses, the people who grew up playing games, who know that they're not actually going to go and shoot up a school, because, you know, that's so passé. So they know that games are a force for good, and the thing will just die like it did with video nasties, which I'm sure you all talk about now, just like you did in the 1980s, or radio if you want to go back to the 1940s. So it's a lot of educators to figure out how to make players learn what you want them to learn. Games can make people learn. If you're an educator, then you give people games because you want them to learn a certain thing. You don't want them to learn things they already know, for example, because they're not really learning it. That's not going to be fun at all. So you want them to learn particular things, and that's what the games are there for. Most game designers don't have a high opinion of educational games, games which have been written specifically to deliver some kind of educational content. This isn't because they don't like education. They think education's a great thing. Why? Even my own children get educated. It's because they like game design. So it's not that they've got anything against education. It's just that they're very much in favour of game design, and because of that, they don't like educational games. See, the logic behind a game that you've written to try and educate somebody is games are fun, and education is not fun. So if you combine them, you get fun education. That's why you would create serious games. The reality is, when you combine them, you get unfun games. Right, there's a moose. The thing is that educators know nothing about game design. Why would they? They don't know about game design, they know about education. That's their field. Now, as an analogy to see what I mean here, suppose that instead of talking about games, we were talking about novels. So there's this guy back in the 1600s comes on and says, oh, I've got this wonderful, wonderful thing here. It's a novel. You just read it. It's about this guy, Don Quixote. He's going off and he's going to try and knock down these windmills and everything. And he gives it to the guy at Cambridge University. And, yes, this is quite entertaining. Yes, I quite like this. Could you maybe perhaps write one of these novels yourself, use it to teach mathematics? No. The thing about it is it's entertaining. The reason you want it is because it's fun. Well, yes, but surely you could. I mean, I can't obviously give money to this low form of art, writing novels. But I could perhaps give you some help if you were to make something which was more respectable. So they go off and they have to write a novel that teaches people how to multiply large numbers together or something. Now, the thing is, a skilled educator really could write a novel that after you read it, you'd come away thinking, I don't know how, but I have a strange understanding of the common law laws regarding property or something. And I just picked it up from this novel. It's fantastic. But they would never get to the end of the novel, because who would ever read a novel like that? It would suck. And it's the same with games. If you want novelists to write novels, because that's what they do. And you want game designers to design games, because that's what they do. And if you, as a non-novelist, want to write a novel that teaches whatever you want to teach, that will suck. You will have to either pay people to read your book or threaten them to make them read your book. Likewise with games. Oh yeah, I'll play games, but only because they suck they suck less than what you would be doing before. Now the thing is, of course, here I've been denigrating the game design abilities of educationalists, but game designers don't know anything about pedagogy. That's not their area. And I'm not even going to try to tell you anything about how people in general learn, how in general we want to teach people in order to make them learn. Because if I did, you would laugh at my naive, simplistic view, just as I will laugh at your game design. We've got two different groups actually in the room. Some people make games, some people want games to be made to do something, and the ones who make games, well, if they're used for academic purposes, that's almost accidental. I mean, Derek has to go out and look for the games. You can't just choose any random game and it's going to be good at teaching things. Likewise, if you want to teach something, you can't just go off and make a game to do it, because it'll be rubbish. So we need to know what you can do between the two. Now, I don't know enough about pedagogy to be able to say that, but I can tell you what I know about what people learn. So I'm going to say how people learn things in games and what games can teach. So these are the basic tools. If what I say is something that you want to teach, then you can think that would be good. You could have a game that would teach that. So your game will suck, but it will only suck in the same way that a first draft novel will suck, and then you can go over it and over it and over it with play testing, and then it'll polish it up, and then it won't suck so much. But if you give a textbook that's pretending to be a novel, that would super suck, and that's what we've got at the moment with most of these serious games. Right. If you want to teach something, you have to consider what can be learned. And this is my basic non-pedagogist view of what can be learned. You can learn facts, such as the North Star is called Polaris. You can learn skills. How do I integrate an equation? You can learn meta skills, which are how to solve problems. And you can learn self-understanding, who you are. Now, games can teach all of those, but they're better at teaching some than they are at teaching others. I'm not here to evangelize games, because frankly, if everybody went to school and the whole time they were there, they spent their time playing games, they'd come home from school all gamed out, and then they wouldn't want to play any games that I want to make. So this is just a tool in your armory if you're wanting to teach through games. Well, this is how you would do it. This is the kind of thing you can teach. So facts. I can list every country in Europe. Might have to add Scotland to that in a couple of years' time. The reason I can do this, I don't always start in Iceland. Sometimes I start down in Greece, and then I would go up to former Yugoslavia, Macedonia, and Albania, and then Bosnia-Herzegovina, and Montenegro, and then Slovenia, Slovakia. I go over to the right a bit. There's Moldavia, Bulgaria, Romania. I mean, I know every country in Europe. Now, why do I know every country in Europe? Not because I've ever sat down and studied a map. The reason is because I played so many games set in Europe that I just know it. If I see that someone's invaded Hungary, well, where's Hungary? Look on the map, there it is. After a while, someone's invaded Hungary. I'm not going to look on the map where Hungary is. I know where Hungary is. It's to the right of Austria, south of Poland, southeast of the Czech Republic. Oh, actually, there's Slovakia between them, but anyway. So I've learned these things not through actually doing it, because I've just played so many games. And these games had nothing to do with learning the geography of Europe. I just picked it up through osmosis. So some of the games might have been games about like war games. Some of them might have been games about economic games or trading games, things like that. There would be games about travel games, just different games. And from these, I know all the countries. I do know all the states in America, but it takes me a little longer to get those, because there's a couple. The last time I did it, well, it was Nebraska was the hold-up. So I know all these things because I played so many games. Games are excellent at teaching facts. So if you want to teach somebody facts, you can teach them facts through a game. The facts that they need to know. The critical point, though, is the game must not be about learning those facts. So if you want to teach people important dates in history, you don't have a game which is about important dates in history. This isn't the case where, hi children, we're going to play a game here. I want you all to answer these questions, and then whoever gets the most wins. Well, no, that's not a game. That's a competition. There's no gameplay to that. You're just trying to make 29 of the children in your class feel bad and one of them feel good. The thing, if you're learning, if you've got a game where you're trying to teach facts, the game must not be about learning those facts, because facts are learned indirectly. They are not learned through the gameplay. If you make a game which is about learning facts, then your game will suck. Anything you can teach through repetition, which is like facts, you can teach through games. So, it's not actually hard. People just play the game, and then they just know the answers. But the game must be about something that will appeal to your players. Rote learning is not appealing. People won't play a game and think, yeah, well, I learned quite a lot from it. It's not fun. If it were fun, you would need the game. What happens is they do the rote learning on their own to get to the fun quicker than if they didn't. The fun part is there. The rote learning is not necessarily, but if I happen to know these things, then I'll get to the fun quicker. It'll make the game flow smoother. So it's not that I think, oh, well, I have to go away and learn all the countries of Europe in order to... It's just your mind is receptive to it because it's following this direction that you're going through. The game must be playable without having learned the facts. So if you want to teach somebody something, and yes, to open this door, you need to work out what 7 times 8 is. If they don't know what 7 times 8 is, then you're saying, go on the internet and look it up. And if they're too young to do that or whatever, then they're not going to. They're just going to look at it and say, well, that's no good, is it? Where's the fun there? So you must be able to play the game without any reference to the facts that you're trying to teach people. The facts come from, are picked up because if every time you need to go through a door you're counting black squares and white squares, and then eventually you figure out, hold on, if I've counted the black squares and I know there's 50 squares, then I don't need to count the white squares. I can just subtract the black from 50. That's something you'll have learned. But if you haven't learned that, you'll just count the black squares and the white squares, and then you'll know which has got the most of, and then you'll go through. So you teach people through indirect learning, but you don't actually make the game force them to learn. Here's an example. I've never actually played this game. This is just one I just come up with. So imagine a 2-player game on a 40 by 40 grid of squares. So you've got 40 squares this way, 40 squares that way. And you start off with 10 squares by 10 squares in a corner, opposite corners. And on your turn, you roll 2 10-sided dice twice. So you might roll 2 10-sided dice and get like a 7 and a 3. And you might roll them again and get a 4 and a 9. You choose one pair from what you've just rolled, so either the 7 and the 3 or the 4 and the 9, and you draw a rectangle with sides as those lengths, fitting it so that it touches at least one of your existing squares or rectangles, orthogonally, not diagonally. And it mustn't overlap any other rectangles. So it's kind of like a knapsack packing problem. You're attempting to generate random shaped rectangles which you're going to try and fit in, expanding your territory to try and pen your opponent in so that they can't expand their territory. And the game ends when one player can't go. Then you add it up, who's got the most of the 40 by 40 mini squares, and they're the winner. Now, what I've just described is abstract. That it doesn't sound a great deal of fun. It would be less stark if I added addressing to provide context. So you would actually beef that up by, you'd say that these aren't actually squares, these are quadrants in outer space. Your civilization of insect people is spreading out and they're attempting to take these little fuzzy Care Bear people away. Yeah? Or it's your expanding city suburbs, your gang warfare if you want, whatever. It's fields for your farms, where you're attempting to grow so that the population back in your original 10 by 10 can all have fun. Or it's ants claiming territory at your picnic. It could be anything. It doesn't really matter, so long as it's something that the people who are going to play it will find interesting, fun, or something that's not going to put them off. What it isn't about is learning your times table. But if you play that game enough, you will learn your times table. Because players, if you roll, say, a 7 and an 8 and a 6 and a 9, one of those gives more squares than the other. But which? Well, what you'll do is you'll say, okay, if I do so you do the 7 by 8 and you count 56, and you do the 6 and 9, you count them all, that's a 54. All right, okay, I'll do the 7 by the 8. The next time you roll 7 by 8, you'll be going, okay, hold on, I remember that was 56. And then you're comparing it against some other number. Yeah. After a while, you roll 7 and 8, you know that that's 56 squares. You don't have to count them anymore. But if you didn't know it was 7 by 8, you could actually still just count the squares. And it would still, the game would just be playable. It's just that you've learned through having played it that these numbers are there. But the game isn't about learning that. It's about your monsters trampling all over somebody else's territory. Your germs attacking somebody else's germs on a Petri dish or something. So after a while, you just remember them. You don't have to count the squares. Now, the thing is, games teach facts incidentally. You play the game, the facts are incidental. If you want to teach facts, you make sure that the incidental facts that people pick up are ones you want to teach. The facts are not the point of the game, though. They're just things you pick up as a result of playing the game. Games are fantastic at teaching facts. If you want to teach facts, games are brilliant at it. But some warnings. First of all, these facts can be made up. I still remember Zamian, Varick, Dumin, West, Bequin and Kazlan because a game I made when I was 15 had those 6 city names in them. They were the letter set, capital letters I had left over after having put all the monster names down, so I had to make my city names up out of the capital letters I had left. So, but even though I can remember those, that is useless to me. Well, obviously not when I'm making a presentation, but other than that, that's not something that applies in everyday life. Also, facts can be false. So if you're playing a role-playing game and you run towards the end of a cliff and you stop, it's like Roadrunner, twang. Whereas in real life, if you ran to the end of a cliff and stopped, your momentum would carry you on and you'd fly off over the cliff, and then you'd learn about gravity in the 12 seconds before you died. Another thing is sometimes real life can be inconvenient. I did a Railway Rivals game, which is a game in the 70s, where there was this city in Spain, I think it was Zaragoza. It was in a really inconvenient place. So I moved it a hexagon to the side, and now it's much better. But if you were wanting to play that game, then you'd learn Zaragoza was not quite in the right place. I also did the same thing with city in southern Spain for a different game, which was a trading game, Mediterranean trading game, and I didn't have enough paper to fit it on. Oh, maybe I'll just move it like 100 kilometres or something this way, and then it does fit on the paper. But really, it's not correct. And people will make changes to the facts in order to make a good game, just like people make changes to movies so that the Americans always win. Now, the other thing about them is they can be incomplete. There are some really good games, pirate games, set in the 1670s, the golden age of piracy out in the Caribbean. You're going out there, you're picking up rum and you're picking up sugar, and you're trading with other places. Sometimes you come across a British Navy ship or a Spanish galleon, and you have to fight them off. And there's some really good games there, but they never carry slaves. None of the ships you see carry slaves. There are no slave translations. Slaves do not exist in this game. Why don't they exist? Well, you don't want to get sued for having mentioned the slave word, because people can get upset at that. I mean, encyclopedias have been sued for talking about slaves, believe it or not. You also, well, you know, it's supposed to be a fun game, and this is rather not a very nice topic. I'm playing this game here. Oh, great, there's a great price for slaves over there in Veracruz. I'll just go along and dump them. And then, oh man, I've got too many slaves here. Oh, the rum's so much better. I'll throw a few slaves overboard and pick up the rum. No one's going to do that, because suddenly the real world context is impacting on the gameplay. So the dressing of the game is affecting the mechanics, which is under basically a trading game or a quest-driven game, something like that. So people will teach you things which are true, but they're not completely true. So if you take a commercial game, well, yeah, it will teach you lots of things, and I can tell you where Trinidad is, and I can tell you where Mobile, Alabama is, and all these things from playing these games. But do I know how many slaves you can fit on a slave ship? Well, actually, I do, because I have actually played a game which did have that. You can get about 300 on, but they won't all make the journey. They won't all come out the other side. But that means that you get more money for them. Well, anyway, so you don't. There are some things you don't learn unless you play the right games, and even then you probably don't know them. Here's an example of somebody having played a game for completely different reasons and learned something from it, which saved his sister's life. So the 12-year-old Norwegian boy, Hans-Jørgen Olsen, is out walking with his sister when a moose attacks. So, moose. Using his World of Warcraft hunter skills, so this moose is going for his sister. He taunts the moose off, "Hey, moose, hey, hey." And the moose says, "Ah!" and comes running at it. And when it charges him, he plays dead. Because that's what you do in World of Warcraft. If you taunt something off somebody, but if you play dead, it won't attack you. So he was 12, he played World of Warcraft, he knew what to do. That's what he did. The moose came along, his sister got away, he wasn't savaged. It gets in the Norwegian newspapers. And this worked because he saved his sister's life. Had he been a mage, his sister would be chipped because you can't fire, you know, well, I know what to do with that. Oh, yes, I just throw the fireball. So look, he was a hunter. Also, that's an example, this is kind of well known, but when you read the direct Norwegian translation, he didn't actually try to taunt it so much as scare it away, and he only played dead because that's when the World of Warcraft came in. So he didn't taunt it, but he did play dead. So there is sort of half the story. Also, because he was in Norway, it wasn't a moose, it was an elk. But Americans don't understand elks, so they converted it into moose because they understand moose. So again, this is quite nice, but it's some of the facts there are changed in order to present a better story to the rest of the world. But nevertheless, this is some guy who's actually learned something useful from playing a game, some useful fact. Right, so having said how great games are about teaching facts, we now get on to skills. So a skill is a process or an action that you've automated to the extent you don't need to think how to do it. Well, this is from my artificial intelligence background, that's what we mean by skills. This might not be what you mean by skills. Everyone's got their own technical terms, but this is what I'm talking about when skills, it's processes rather than just data. It's things that you have to do in an order. You start with things that you already know how to do without thinking a great deal. So things like, I can press a pedal, yeah, with my foot, yeah, I can play a drum, yeah, I can press a pedal. I can turn a wheel, yeah, I can turn a wheel, yeah. I remember when I was on that ship and I had to do it all to get out of the ship before I was drowning. How to move a stick. Well, yeah, I can move a stick, yeah, sticks are sticks. So I learn all these things and I practice and practice and practice until I can drive. Because I've learned how to put these things together in combinations so that after a while I've absorbed the combinations, the order in which I need to do these things. So from basic sets of actions, you can compile a greater procedure, in programming terms, or function, which you can then execute directly rather than having to execute it through the small things. If you don't have a given skill, the problem is you can't play a game that requires that skill. Games are not great at teaching skills. They're hopeless at, in fact, except for social skills in multiplayer, they're good at that. They're good at teaching social skills, but they're not good at teaching how to do things so that you can just automate it. You play the game, go away, and suddenly you can drive a car. They can help, but you probably wouldn't want to do it as a game, because if they'd learnt it as a game, then they may carry that with them. There are 3 reasons why games aren't great at teaching skills. First of all, these skills are not easily reskinnable. It's fair enough to be able to hide facts as something else, rote learning things as something else, but if you're trying to teach someone how to multiply matrices together, well, you're not going to disguise that. Multiply these different fruits together to make these different recipes. No, it's not going to work. It gets in. It's very difficult to change the context to try it so that the people who are put off by the abstract things have something more concrete to look at, and it's not very good at that. The other thing is they may learn the skills, but they may be the wrong skills. So if you play a lot of text adventures, you will learn to type. You will not learn to touch type. You will learn to type things like W space, W dot E dot dot dot, meaning go west, then go east 3 times. That's the sort of thing you might learn. You might learn things like a K space Z space F space axe, meaning kill the zombie with the axe. That's the sort of thing you learn. You're not going to learn how to touch type long paragraphs. You're just going to be able to type very short things very quickly. And the other thing is processes get in the way of gameplay. Because if you're trying to teach somebody how to do some process through a game, then the game inevitably becomes about that process. And then you can't hide the fact that, look, play this game. We've tried to make it into a game, but really it's about learning how to solve Newton's laws of third laws of motions, or 3 laws of motion. You can't get away from the fact. If it's about learning processes, then that gets in the way. Now, I'm not saying the games can't do these things. You could, if you really wanted to, and I'm sure people who play Angry Birds would be able to calculate how far a cannon would go better than people who haven't played it. But all 3 of these things get in the way. So you can do it, but really you probably would want to do something else. This is a crater in Tanzania. Skills, unfortunately, are exactly the kind of things that people who want to teach things want to teach using games. Because skills are actually quite hard to teach anyway. So, well, if people don't like these things, well, let's try and teach it through games. Let's play games when it all goes wrong. If you try and sneak in some kind of skill gaming, the resulting game will be about that skill, and then it's not a game at all. The person best at maths wins. Well, you don't need a game to decide who the person best at maths is. Playing the game isn't going to improve your maths because you've not got a motivation to do it if it's just a simple who's got the best skills thing. The other thing is that if people find a game about a skill really fun, they would have to find the skill itself really fun. In which case, why do you need the game? You just give them the skill. If it's a fun skill, then give them that. They'll do it. They'll like it. People like programming. You don't need to give them a game about programming. Just give them a game to program, but you don't need to teach programming through a game if people actually like programming. Similarly, if people like writing, creative writing, you don't have to make the game, have a game to teach creative writing, but you can make a game which will which will help you to explain creative writing better, like how to structure things. You can do that sort of stuff. But the thing it's about has to be intrinsically fun itself if it's a skill. And if it is intrinsically fun, well, you don't really necessarily need a game. You just let them do it anyway. Right, meta skills. These are picked up from playing lots of different games, and they are high quality problem solving, solution seeking skills. So people who play games are generally pretty good at solving problems. Just a random, if you give someone a random problem, they'll be better at solving it than if they'd never played games. And players can benefit hugely from acquiring and honing these, because society really needs these kind of people. People can do these things. So it's the sort of thing we really maybe would want to teach, but these are skills, but they're not skills you can test for in exams. So yes, the world is great if everybody's super smart, able to think of all these marvelous ways of solving problems, but how are we going to solve that? Well, IQ tests. Yeah, last IQ test I took asked me, what were you wearing last St. Patrick's Day? I don't remember. I don't even know what I'm wearing now. Why would I know what I was wearing last St. Patrick's Day? So yes, there are some things which aren't necessarily going to help, but so yes, we want all people to do this, but the problem is that if you want to show that games are great at this kind of thing, you say, okay, well, here's a group of people who we're not going to teach the games to because we're so cruel that we think that they are we're going to... Sorry, this is... Okay, here is a bunch of people we are not going to expose to games. Even though we think games are so good that they would benefit, we are going to make them suffer by not giving them the games. Here are the lucky people we're going to give all the games to, and these are going to come out smarter than these poor slobs here we chose not to see our games. The people who do this, they go away, and sure enough, they are smarter. How do you test? How do you test if they're smarter? Because it's taken 5 years of playing games to get that far. There's a lot of other factors in instead. And what, you give them an exam? What are you going to do? How are you actually going to test their problem-solving abilities? You're going to throw monkeys at them and see what they do. I mean, it's very difficult to test it. It's not as simple as sit down, do the test at the end, we know whether your maths is better or not, or whether you can multiply quicker or what. Now, for meta skills, games are magnificent. They're absolutely fantastic. They're probably among the best things you can do for teaching people how to solve problems. And the people who have a yen for this kind of meta things generally come across as being smart individuals. You know, they come across as being creative, they come across as being knowledgeable, able to pick facts up very quickly because they play, not because they play games. It might be that they're just the kind of people who are attracted to them. I personally believe that if you play enough games, you can become much better at problem solving because I have seen it happen. I've seen people who weren't very good at problem solving play games and as a result improve in their problem solving. But I don't know if that's something that games will do to everybody or if it's just something that it'll only work if you were predisposed to it. So it's some kind of latent talent. And this is kind of getting into the nurture versus nature area, which means it's getting political, so I'm not going to go any further. But I know that people can learn from games. I just don't know if everybody can learn meta skills from games. Self-understanding. MMOs, massively multiplayer online role-playing games, are unparalleled in their ability to deliver this. They're better than movies, they're better than books, they're better than anything except being shot at by people, which is probably a bit better. But the consequences of failure are higher. But it doesn't work on children, and it takes 2 years of playing 2 to 4 hours every day to work on adults. But nevertheless, people having played these games will understand themselves better in a way that if they'd done anything else for those 2 to 4 hours in the evenings for those 2 years, they wouldn't. The only reason I'm mentioning these is because MMOs is my particular area, so they get a shout out. They're also good if you're an observer and you want to see how groups of people behave. So if you want to learn about, if you're a social scientist and you want to see how rumours spread or how people react to a change in government or things like that, MMOs are pretty good. Economics, they're really good because they're experimental. You can make changes to, you've got 20 servers all with the same game on it, and you say, okay, I want to see what the effect of change in price does. On one of the servers, I'll make the healing potion be worth 10 times as much, and on the others, I won't. So I'll restrict the supply, see if the price goes up. Turns out it does. It has actually been done. Ted Castronova did it, not for 20 servers, but still. So there's all sorts of things you can learn from these, but you don't have the $50 million it would take to make one, so this is just so you know that a few years later when they only take $500 to make, you can. Right, so I'm going to wind up with some advice, and this is my advice for people who want to teach something through games. Avoid what you want to teach being the central mechanism, the central mechanic of the game, because if it's there, it's either fun, in which case you don't need the game, or it's not fun, in which case it'll still be not fun even if it's in a game. You don't teach adding up by making a game about adding up. You teach a game about adding up by making a game about dinosaurs, because they're cool, and you have to feed the dinosaurs food, but you don't want to give them too much food because then you can't attract the other dinosaurs. And you can see how just having people play with numbers will teach them whatever numerical based tasks. But the game's not about the numbers. The game is about feeding dinosaurs, which is cool. And also, if you give them their real names, then people might come away learning some dinosaur names as well, if not how to pronounce them. Second piece of advice, don't try to teach a skill by making the game rely on that skill, because people loathe this. If you're trying to teach something that requires a skill that people don't have, because you're trying to teach it, well, they don't have that skill, they will hate it. You've got to give, if you want to teach the skill, you've got to make sure they've got other skills and they will pick it up. But then the game can't be about learning the skill, but the problem is, how can you teach it without making it be that? It's very difficult to do it. You can do it, but it's quite domain dependent. Depends quite a lot on the application domain. For example, if I play you at snooker, you will thrash me. I'm useless at snooker. That doesn't mean that I can't have fun games of snooker. All I need to do is find some guy with no arms, and then I'll be pretty good, probably on a par, because I'm useless at snooker. Unless you can find someone who's got the same kind of skill level as you at snooker, snooker's not going to be fun. You might say, oh yes, I once played the world champion at chess, and it was such an honour and a privilege. Yeah, well, maybe it was, but you didn't enjoy the game, did you? And yes, I enjoyed it. Yes, well, you could have looked at somebody else's game and got the same intellectual stimulation from how he thrashed or she thrashed them. Learning a skill isn't fun if the other people already have it and you don't. If a game relies on the skill, then you need to teach it before playing the game. But then, if they've already got it, all they're really doing is practicing it. So the skill, making them repeat things, that's back to rote learning. But you wouldn't want to teach it. I mean, it's like if you want someone to learn French, you don't give them French newspapers and give them a French newspaper every day until they understand French. That isn't going to help them. They need to understand some French before they can read the French newspapers, and they need to have access to ways to find out what the French says, what it means, in order to understand it. But these are all external things. If you do a game which is learning French and it requires you already know French, well, no. You have to teach it as facts. Yeah. If I go and speak to I can get through this door by speaking to the guard in French, or I can go the long way around and speak to the other guard in English. Well, okay, maybe I'll try speaking French. That didn't work, but you did tell me what to say next time, so you can see some things, but again, even that's quite obvious what's going on, and it's not going to fool kids who are up for a game, but they're not up for a game which is trying to paste facts on their heads. Don't try to control the learning of abstract meta skills. People will learn these, but it's very hard. You probably shouldn't try to control them. You're trying to control how people think, which isn't a good thing. Meta skills involve reflecting on other skills that you've got, other mental skills you've got, which means that you have to have existing meta skills in order to be able to analyze the other ones. So you're like applying what you already know to itself. These may be meta skills that you don't have. I don't know if everyone's even capable of having them. The liberal in me says, yes, they are. The conservative in me says, except that guy up the road, I don't think he's ever going to be able to figure things out. I'm not wired up to be able to draw. No matter what you do, I will be unable to draw. Doesn't matter if you threaten to feed me marzipan, I will still not be able to draw. And it may be there are people like that with meta skills. Doesn't matter how much you teach them to self-reflect, they never go. They always collapse to one level. I don't know. That's not my area, but it's something where if you're trying to teach meta skills, you can't rely on people having any skills in that area. It's very difficult to control that things. What you can do is set the conditions for people to learn them, but you can't guarantee they actually will learn them. So it's this, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. You can say, look, if you play this game here, then if it sets your mind on fire, then great, you'll be able to play. But it might not set your mind on fire. You might want training rather than education. And the final thing is ask a game designer to look at your game's design. If you're actually trying to make a game that's going to deliver some teaching or encourage some learning, get a game designer to look at your game's design. Now here's an industry secret. Most game designers aren't actually good at game design. However, they are an order of magnitude better than you are. What you should do is specify the educational payload that a game must deliver, and then your game designer will, that's one of the constraints about the game design, they can make it fun. Or they can just say, no, I can't see how to make that fun, you're stuffed. If one of them says your design sucks, believe them, it does. You don't say, well, I'll just go and find another game designer. Well, okay, well, that's like saying, well, these children didn't learn, I'll just go and find some children who will. No, if somebody who knows whether something's going to be fun or not to your chosen audience says it's not, then go away, or at least ask them, how could I make it fun? Oh, this is Ngoro crater in World of Warcraft. It's named after that one I showed you earlier, the Ngorongoro crater in Tanzania, 610 meters deep. It's the world's largest unbroken caldera. If you play World of Warcraft, you will learn geography. Any World of Warcraft player who 20 years from now is on Who Wants to Be well, it probably won't be a millionaire, it'll probably be something more than that. And if they're asked what's the name of the world's longest unbroken caldera, and it gives a list, and one of them looks like Ngorongoro, they will say it. They will say, well, I played World of Warcraft. They probably named that crater after it. Okay, that's what it is. So they would recognize that, just because they based that particular zone in World of Warcraft on that particular place in the real world. So you can pick up facts just from randomness. So use games to teach facts, very good, people will learn them. Teach the facts indirectly, don't use them directly. Don't make the game be about the facts. Don't make success in the game be in any way influenced by knowledge of the facts. You must be able to play the game without knowing what you're trying to teach. Do make it that if you know the facts, the play will be streamlined a little. You'll learn them just because you've played it a bit, and it'll just be a bit quicker. That's a good way to do it. If in doubt, ask yourself, would this be a stupid thing to do if this were a novel instead of a game? And if the answer is yes, don't do it. And that's my talk.